In the last months, I received a lot of requests by some people, well, some salespeople who wanted to change industry. Now, I don't know if it's because of AI, because of all the changes going on, but a lot of people from, especially the SaaS industry, want to move into other industries. I have a few answers to give to these people, but I thought it was a better idea to have a chat with a friend and a mentor who actually consults a lot of salespeople on several topics. And one of these is really how to change industry effectively. So I'm happy to welcome back Dave Brock on the show. Hi, Dave.
It's always such a great opportunity to meet with you and talk to you, Tobia. Thanks for the invitation. I'm really looking forward to this.
I'm looking forward to. And by the way, you've been one of the first in believing in the podcast. And since that time, the audience grew a little bit, probably thanks to your episode too. So if you want to just share with the audience, the new audience, who you are, what you do, what you have done, and what you're doing for the sales profession in general.
Sure. Again, my name's Dave Brock. I am author of the Sales Manager Survival Guide. And I run a company called Partners in Excellence. It's a consulting company, and we work primarily in business strategy and go-to-market strategies. And our client base tends to be uh, diverse, but it tends to be probably global 500 type corporations. So we work with very, very large corporations in technology and software, professional services, in industrial products, and in basic materials and those kinds of things. We also, while our focus is kind of on larger corporations, we spend a lot of time with very small companies. A lot of our clients who may have been CROs or CEOs in large corporations go to startups and they ask us to come help them. And I sit on the boards of a bunch of startups. In my history, I started selling mainframe computers for IBM and went up and ran divisions and went into other technology organizations as CRO or CEO. And I've been part of several major, very successful startups and several failing startups. So I have a very diverse background.
Thank you, Dave. And as I shared before, like the main purpose of this chat is really to provide some guidance to the salespeople and the managers who really want to change industry, especially in 2025. And as I was sharing, I received a lot of requests from people of the SaaS industry, and I'm honestly one of these who are really tired about same framework, same methods, and same patterns repeating over and over.
Yeah.
So as always, I will ask you a few questions. A few of those will be related to salespeople, another few related to sales managers on how to change industry or at least try to change industry effectively.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
let's imagine I'm Tobia, I'm a salesperson, I want to be hired in another industry, okay? So going back to your book, one of the topics that I love the most is how you put emphasis on understanding the internal relational and political dynamics of a company when you get hired. So,
Mm-hmm.
what kind of steps would you suggest a salesperson who breaches into another industry to really understand what kind of relationships to establish, but also to capture the real political dynamics inside an organization?
So let me back it up a little bit and say I'm a salesperson and I'm in a certain industry, and we'll use SaaS as an example. And for whatever reasons, I'm looking for something different, maybe a different industry, a different marketplace, a different set of products and solutions that I sell. So if I set that as a career goal and say, I want to shift from here over to here, how do I do this? So I think part of it is, and it's part of the characteristic of what I see of being really good salespeople, is is it's doing your homework. So say, what is the industry that I'm wanting to shift to, and why do I want to shift to it? Say I want to, and let's just use as an example because it's an extreme shift, shifting from selling SaaS products to industrial products, so machinery, equipment, those kinds of things. So what I want to do is I want to study this, and I want to study and see, what is that industry? Who are the major players? What are the things they do? How do people in sales sell in that industry? So I want to study it, whether it's reading certain things in LinkedIn, whether it's reading certain books and blog posts, whether it's maybe attending convention that's in your region, and just seeing, for a few things. One, to start understanding who's who, to start understanding the words and terms, and to start understanding the concepts. And also, it's basic, and you don't have to become expert. You just have to become somewhat knowledgeable. And then as you start doing that, then you start saying, well, what organizations am I going to target to look for a job within that industry? And so you start, just like you're prospecting for a customer, you start saying, well, what's my ICP? Well, it's what's the industry that I want to go after? What's the type of company that I want to go after? And that kind of thing. And then you start, developing relationships, approaching them, whether it's looking at their job board and applying for it, and so on, and that kind of thing. So now here's where I think people moving, say, from SaaS to a very different industry, or from a very different industry into SaaS, whatever way it is, I think they can offer some real value and some real differentiation that can make them very attractive to the hiring managers. Is if they've studied and done a little bit of basic homework, they can bridge their experience that says, here's some of the things that made me very successful in a SaaS selling environment. And your environment of industrial products is very different, but here's how I might take.
This audio was created with Podcastle.ai.
Is very different, but here's how I might take some of the ideas and things that I learned and apply them in your environment. So now what you're showing is some real creativity, some critical thinking, that you're demonstrating to the person that's interviewing you, that you're thinking about how you take your past experience and bridge it into this kind of new role. And I think that kind of thing's very effective. If I look at, for instance, my company as consultants, we work in all sorts of industries in different environments. And it's not because we're expert in those environments, but because we've been able to take ideas from here and start applying them over here and showing people how they work. And the salesperson is the very same. If you can start taking ideas from, here's how I've done some things, here's how I might apply them here, and then here's also the things I need to learn in your industry to apply those things. But if I'm a high-performing person, I'm constantly learning, I'm constantly growing, so that shouldn't stand in the way of my success.
Thank you. And I think that's a really good answer. And I have a follow-up question on this. How do you understand which idea might be useful or might work in another different industry? Do you start from, I don't know, the problems you faced, or the potential buyer, which probably sometimes overlap? What is a good way to understand, okay, this idea might work in a totally different industry?
I think I think the things we learn is as sales professionals, the underlying principles are all constant. It's how I apply those principles to a different context, say a different industry type, a different customer type, a different situation. So it's my ability to adapt those ideas and apply them in a different context. If I'm selling within an industry, every customer, every problem, and every context is different. So if I'm going to be a high performing salesperson, I have to be very adaptable. And that kind of thing. So if I'm a high performing salesperson and I'm moving from one industry to another industry, that same characteristic of being adaptable is the most important characteristic. And also, and that's what you want to, I think, communicate in your discussions with people is here's the process that has made me very successful, that I've learned. I've been very adaptable. I've been successful in these industries because I can adapt to this context and this context and this context. And here, in coming to talk to you today, is I've done some research. I have some ideas, and my job is to learn as quickly as possible and to adapt these basic fundamentals that have made me a great professional into your particular role. And you can too, as part of the conversation, I can bring new and different ideas that would be helpful not only to my performance, but maybe to you and the team, is that you can learn some of the things that I learned, say, in selling SaaS that you might apply here. One of if you look at the cheat code I use in my business and you and I have talked about it before, I call it artful plagiarism, is I take these ideas from SaaS and I apply them over here. And I take these ideas from, you and I had a conversation about the basic materials business, which I think is such a fascinating business. How do you take those ideas and apply them into SaaS and those kinds of things? And it's that kind of learning, it's that kind of adaptability that the right hiring managers will be interested in and intrigued in. There are a lot of managers that you'll say, well, gee, you don't have 20 years of experience in this industry. Why would I ever bother with hiring you? If they don't open up their minds and look at new possibilities, then you're wasting your time. But for those managers, and there are huge numbers of them that say, hey, you have a lot of interesting experience that we can do here. So then it's a matter of getting them comfortable that you're an aggressive learner, that you're curious, that you have a past history of good performance, but that performance has been built on adaptability. I think that's critical. And so that gets them interested in hiring you. And then the next thing is, once you start the job, how do you get started?
The concept of learning is something that you touched also in these two answers, but you talk a lot about it in your book, in the Sales Manager Survival Guide, in your articles and your blog posts and your LinkedIn posts and so on.
Yep.
And you point in the book that the most effective salespeople know how to learn quickly. Now, same example. I'm Tobia. I want to change industry. I want to go into a new industry. How can I quickly learn about new products, customer, industry, which one to prioritize? But also, more basically, how to learn in a way that I can show that I'm credible. Because I think that this is where the massive problems will come up in the future, like changing industry. Maybe you learn everything, but you show up in front of a prospect or a buyer and you're not credible because probably you don't master that lingo or that kind of knowledge. What is your advice in like learning effectively?
I think the advice, and I think where a lot of people both hiring managers and people looking for jobs make a mistake. They focus on product knowledge. Product knowledge is the easiest thing to learn. It's the easiest, it's the fastest thing. It's what the companies are prepared to teach you. But we focus on product knowledge. How much do you understand these products? But even within an industry, if again, I'll go back to SaaS, if I'm sitting here selling these SaaS products and I move here selling these SaaS products, they're different. I have to learn the product. So I have to figure out how to learn those quickly. So product knowledge is not the issue. Business knowledge, business acumen is the issue. So how do I understand, basic things like the structure?
This audio was created with podcastle.ai.
And, basic things like the structure of the industry, the major players in the industry. What are the big issues in the industry? And if I'm targeting organizations that are selling certain types of solutions, where do those solutions fit within the industry? How do people use them? What problems cause them to do those things? And that research is actually very easy to do. You could sit down with ChatGPT this afternoon and start saying, help me learn and help me understand, and it'll give you the broad concepts and the broad ideas that are very trustworthy as you try and get very, very specific to what does this company face. Because of the way ChatGPT works, I wouldn't trust the answers on that, but to give you a broad understanding of the industry, a broad understanding of the issues and how it works, that's a great starting point. And then, read the LinkedIn groups around that industry. Read the articles, again, you could use Perplexity or something like that to do searches of, I'd like to understand the basic business issues, the basic changes based in these industries. So you can learn a lot through the internet and through the AI tools and all that, but go start talking to people. Again, you don't have to be really deep in it, but you have to have enough understanding to have an intelligent conversation.
Then that makes sense. And because otherwise, if this is not done effectively, can bring to problems or mistakes. And this is another topic I want to touch with you. You've seen probably a lot of salespeople moving industries, okay, in your consultancy experience. What kind of problems are other than just learning about the product, what kind of other mistakes do they make while changing industry?
And it's a mistake, not even changing industries, but changing companies. This is the way I always did things. So this is the way I'm going to do it in this job. I made a major mistake myself in the same way. Is I had been a mid to senior level executive at IBM. I was recruited as the CRO for another technology company. And I remember sitting in a meeting one time with all my regional vice presidents and everybody sitting around, and I was getting impatient. And finally I started saying, well, this is the way we do things in IBM. And one of the regional vice presidents had the courage to sit up. He became one of my best friends. He had the courage to say, but Dave, this isn't IBM. It's different here. And that was this huge wake-up call that I was relying on my past experience, which was good experience, but things were different here, and I hadn't taken the time to understand the differences. And so in any role, when we move from one company to another company, when we move from one industry to another industry, there's a lot of experience that we've had that we can leverage, But we also have to recognize that sometimes that experience is baggage, and we have to discard it and learn new things.
So it's good if we take from the past and try to find commonalities, but not if we copy and paste. Let me put it in this way.
Copy paste never works, but adapting and tweaking is always very helpful.
And thank you for the answer. Now, Dave, moving to sales managers indeed, because I think this is probably for me, the most difficult scenario, like a sales manager changing industry radically. And always starting from your book, you give one important tip: observe and listen in the first 30 days without starting too quickly. Now, how do we apply this in a scenario of a sales manager who changes industry, considering all the pressures that this person is probably under?
So I think in sales, we have, because we're action oriented and results oriented people, we always have the propensity of wanting to move a little bit too fast, to get out, to get out ahead of ourselves on things. In the United States, we have this kind of Wild West mentality that dominates things, and it's I see so much of this ready, fire, aim kind of mentality, and 90% of the time we fail. We're firing at the wrong thing. We're reacting to the wrong thing. We're responding to the wrong thing. So I always say, you got to pause a beat. You have to kind of, assess the situation. You have to see, what's really happening here. What are the issues that I see coming up, whether I'm a salesperson moving into it and I'm looking at it, or I'm a manager moving into it saying, let me assess the situation and understand the situation first, and then start determining what actions are most appropriate to address those things in the situation. So that way you do a ready, aim, fire type of thing. And it's interesting is if you look at the ready, fire, aim approaches, ready, fire, aim, I make mistakes, I screw it all up, so I have to recover from those mistakes and figure out a new answer again and do that again. But if I do a ready, aim, fire approach, is the lapse time and the lapse cost is much shorter than making the mistakes and fixing them.
So the advice is, managers, if you change industry, don't create your own mistakes. Otherwise, then you have to solve them, and you have twice the mistakes to be solved.
That's really well. That's really well said. Unless you're paid for the mistakes that you solve, so then you want to make a lot of mistakes and then get paid for solving those mistakes.
Some of them built a career, so I don't know. Yep. Anyway, same questions that I asked for salespeople, now for sales managers. What kind of mistakes do you see them making when...
This audio was created with Podcastle.ai.
Them making when they shift industry? What kind of mistakes do sales manager repeat over and over?
I think one is doing the things I always did in the past. They may be irrelevant to what I've done, what I'm doing right now. I think not understanding the industry, the markets and the structure of the industries, this whole kind of business acumen thing. I think not understanding the people and the people both within your own organization and within your customer organization and within kind of the extended community is things like, again, we rush to act, without understanding how things really work. So even things like if I move into a new job in a company in a new industry, I want to understand how work gets done within my company. How do we get work done? What are the workflows? What are the processes? How do I fit in and start adding value to that? How do my people get work done? And how do I start adding value to help up their levels of performance? What can I bring from my past experience that might be new ideas? And what new things do I have to learn to help them improve their performance?
So it's always a matter of adaptability, because I've seen a lot of sales managers
Mm-hmm.
either changing companies or changing industry that as soon as they are hired, on their eyes, everything is wrong. You know what I mean? They got to change everything
Yeah,
instead of adding
yeah,
value first and then shaping the whole processes according to the value that they
yeah,
bring. I think this is another common mistake that most of them do, especially I think in the, probably I'm biased because the vast majority of my experience, but also my clients are in the SaaS industry. This is
yeah.
really common in the SaaS industry.
Yeah, I have a very good friend and client. He's a gentleman that used to work for me a number of years ago. And when I first hired him, he was my regional vice president for APAC in a kind of a technology products organization. And he was very good at that. And then over time, he left to another organization. It was not technology products, but it was industrial products. And then he went to a software organization. Then he went to a professional services organization. Then he went to a basic materials organization. Now he's at another industrial products organization. In most of those roles, he's been CRO. And what he's done is the thing I see about Yugong is he has such a diversity of experiences across so many different industries that now when I look at what he does with his current teams, is he said, I learned this when I was selling these software products. How do we take this idea and um, and apply this idea in the technology products that we're selling today? Or I learned this when I was in professional services. How do we take this idea and apply it here? And what I see in him that's very rare is he has such a diversity of experiences, but he's able to synthesize those experiences and take different ideas and apply them to continually improving the organizations that he's in. And he's highly sought after as a CRO. He works mainly in private equity companies, and the private equity companies just love him because he has such a different perspective and so many different experiences all in one person.
But now I have another question for you, Dave, because there are a lot of benefits in hiring someone from another industry. But my question is, why do you think companies are scared? Every time I look at a job application, a job requirements, 15 years of experience in the same vertical, the same product, the same thing. Why do you think most of the companies are a little bit scared of hiring someone with a different perspective or background?
I think it's the concept we all become prisoners of our own experience. We tend to surround ourselves with people who've had similar experiences in things like that. So if we're in SaaS, we hang out with SaaS people. If we're in industrial products, we hang out with industrial products people. So in that, we get security in that because we see other people in those industries are doing similar things to us. We're each being successful in different ways. We're competing with each other, but we get security in seeing other people doing similar kinds of things. And so and so we start getting insular. And so here's the problem is when we become so locked into our own industry, we don't see that we may be underperforming. We become blind to the idea that things could be better. And I don't think it's any secret. If you look at SaaS right now, SaaS is totally broken. And SaaS is totally broken, and people are trying to figure out, what do I do? And now we have AI on top of that, which is making SaaS even more broken. And the big critique I have with that is they keep talking to each other. And I keep saying, why don't you bring in somebody from this different industry? Why don't you look at ideas there? Because the things that they're doing outside of this may be the ideas that save you. But it's human nature is we tend to, hang out with people who think the same, do the same, have the same kinds of things. It reinforces us. It makes us feel good. But at the same time, it makes us blind.
I think this is something you wrote also in a LinkedIn post recently about the 2% of, global GDP, like how much the SaaS industry accounts in terms of. So we probably, as you said, we feed ourselves with our own data. So we just look at our 2% and we try to make it relevant. And I think that the other way, like another explanation of why.
This audio was created with podcastle.ai.
Another explanation of why SaaS industry is broken is really how we change the lingo of things that people have done for, I don't know, the past 100 years, like multi-threading, which is essentially navigation, which is basically talking to different departments inside an organization. Everyone has done that in every type of product. We just label them differently and try to make them viral. You know what I mean?
That's exactly it. I keep, when I want to get nasty with people, is they say, well, SaaS is different. It's this recurring revenue. It's this rent, this contract and renewal stuff and all that. And I said, well, gee, the very first computer system I ever sold, I could only sell under a subscription model. You couldn't outright buy a computer system. So these people spent $10 million. It was $10 million basically of ARR that I created, and that was back in the early 80s. Because there wasn't anything other than a subscription model at the time. So again, I think we tend to, in these new industries, think if we've invented everything, but what we've really done is we've taken and adapted models. And that works, but we have to continually take and look outside ourselves and adapt those models and do new things.
Thank you for this answer. I have one last question. You've given a lot of advice, but if there is only one golden advice you will give both to salespeople and sales managers who want to shift industry, which advice will you give? Just one.
I think it's stay curious and always learn. And because that's the thing, is that if within your own industry, the way you're going to be successful is to stay curious and always learn and always try new things. If you're going to shift industries, the way you're going to do it successfully is to be curious about that industry, learn about that industry, and then go in, and you'll get your teeth knocked in a few times, but you'll learn very, very quickly, and you'll adapt and you'll perform very, very well. And also, if anything, it's stay curious and always learn.
Dave, before we we close the episode. Any other interesting project you're working on? There are a lot of people, especially in my network, who ask me, Tobias, will you please ask David when he will write another book? So there we go. What are you working on, and when will this book be out? Just for my.
Well, I'm already 4 years, maybe 5 years behind on one book. Is I have this book I promised when I released this book. I said the next one is going to be the Sales Executive Survival Guide, and that should have come out 5 years ago. I have it about 3/4 written. I haven't been able to finish it for various different, mostly bad reasons, but I have to finish that. I'm also writing a book. My co-authors are ChatGPT and Claude on kind of reimagining the customer experience and reimagining selling. I'm looking, and you've seen me write about this recently. I'm looking. So here's a question I'd like to pose to the listeners. What would happen if you disappeared? Would your customers notice? Would they care? What would happen if you disappear? So if they're in a buying process and you suddenly started ghosting them and you didn't respond, would they care? If they bought your product and you suddenly disappeared, there'd be some minor annoyances, but would they care? And most of the time they don't. And that's a problem. So I'm trying to say, and I'm using the word, it's an obscure word right now, how do we become entangled in our customers' businesses? How do we become so important to them that they come and say, hey, Tobia, I'd like to talk to you about some of these ideas, or we're thinking about some of these things, and that you become not just a vendor to the business, but you become important to them and their business. And I think that's one of the key fundamental shifts that we need to drive. If you look at like Matt Dixon's new book, The Activator Sale, a lot of what he's talking about in that is the same kind of concept, but it's how do we become important beyond just what we sell, but important because they want our ideas, they want our opinions. And I think that's just really critical. So I'm writing kind of a book. It'll probably be a short book on that. It's interesting. I'm having simultaneous debates with ChatGPT and Claude about how to do this. And they're helping me come up with some fascinating ideas. So
they'll be out soon.
They'll be out soon, yes.
That's a good one. Dave, thank you so much for this time. I think that we had a really good conversation, and I think that most of the people in the audience will find really actionable insights on how to change industry, because apparently now a lot of people wanted to, just to refresh their CV a little bit. And the more we use the same structured frameworks, the more people will probably shift industry for the benefit of the whole profession.
Yeah.
So
super.
Thank you so much, Dave. And we're always in touch, but next episode we will be talking about your books. So get ready.
Well, thank you. I always love these conversations because I learned so much from you. And you have that kind of curious and open mindset. So that's why I look forward to both the ones that we record and the other ones that we have kind of just between ourselves. They're so much fun. And so I really appreciate you inviting me here. This is a lot of fun.
And I appreciate one of my mentors telling me that. So thank you so much, Dave. And talk to you soon.
Thank you. Take care.
This audio was created with Podcastle.ai.